A city for 20,000 people lies hidden beneath the Turkish landscape. This is the ancient underground metropolis of Derinkuyu. By the end of this exploration, you will understand the brilliant, almost impossible engineering that allowed an entire civilization to live and thrive in total secrecy. How did they breathe deep underground, and what terrifying threat forced them to build it? We are about to descend into a world of massive stone doors, secret water sources, and labyrinths designed to trap invaders. What does it truly take for a society to vanish beneath the earth? That landscape of towering spires and deep valleys was not merely a dramatic setting. It was the very first and most important piece of engineering for Derinkuyu, a gift from the earth itself. The rock of Cappadocia is a material known as volcanic tuff, a soft stone formed from compacted volcanic ash. Think of it not as solid granite, but more like a dense, ancient sandstone. For the builders of Derinkuyu, this was the perfect medium. With simple bronze and later iron tools, they could carve through it almost like wood, shaping rooms, corridors, and staircases with a degree of precision that would have been impossible in harder stone. But here is the brilliant part. Once exposed to the air, this soft tuff undergoes a process. It hardens. The very act of carving it triggered a chemical change, turning the freshly cut walls into a stable, durable shell. This meant they could excavate vast, multi-level spaces without constant fear of collapse. The stone provided natural insulation, keeping the underground city cool in the scorching summer and warm during the cold Anatolian winters. It was also porous enough to allow for a subtle, passive airflow, a hint at the sophisticated ventilation system we will explore. So the genius of Derinkuyu begins not with a blueprint, but with the ground beneath the builder's feet. The geology dictated the dream. It allowed a society to ask a monumental question. What if we did not just build on the land, but within it? This leads us to the architects of this vision, a people whose identity is as layered as the city they carved. The identity of the first architects is our first true encounter with the city's mystery. Who first conceived of carving a world beneath the world? The answer is not a single name, but a whisper of many voices echoing through the stone. Historians look at the deepest, most ancient levels and see the possible handiwork of the Phrygians, a powerful Iron Age civilization known for their monumental rock-cut tombs and fortresses. Around 8 or 7 centuries before the Common Era, these master carvers of soft stone would have possessed the perfect skill set to begin such an ambitious project. But some researchers look even further back to the Hittites, an empire that dominated this region centuries earlier. Could the first simple chambers have been Hittite storerooms or shelters, later expanded beyond recognition? The most profound expansions, however, are widely linked to a different group facing a dire need for secrecy: early Christian communities. From around the 4th century of the Common Era onward, these communities are believed to have transformed and massively enlarged Derinkuyu into a sanctuary, a place to shelter from periods of conflict and persecution. This layering of history is the key to understanding the city. It was likely never built by one civilization in one great effort. Instead, think of it as a living architectural document, edited and expanded by generation after generation. Each culture that found it saw its potential and added its own chapter, carving new levels, new defenses, new sanctuaries. This cumulative effort over perhaps 1,000 years turns a simple question of who built it into a deeper puzzle. Was Derinkuyu a single city, or a collection of cities stacked one atop the other, each built by people who thought they were the last? To answer that, we must look past the grand vision and examine the humble reality of their work, starting with the most basic question of all. What tools did they use to carve this stone masterpiece? The tools they used were not complex, but their application was a masterpiece of sustained human effort. Picture the scene not of a modern construction site, but of a dark, echoing chamber lit by flickering oil lamps. The primary instruments were simple metal picks and chisels, hammers, and likely wooden wedges. A worker would strike the soft tuff with a pick, not to break it apart violently, but to score a deep line. Then, using a chisel and hammer, they would carefully work along that line, prying out blocks of stone. It was a process more akin to sculpture than demolition, a patient, rhythmic act repeated millions of times, but this created an immediate and massive problem. For every room they carved, they created a mountain of rubble. On the upper levels, removing this debris was straightforward, but as they descended to the 5th, the 10th, the 15th level, the challenge became immense. How do you move tons of rock up through a narrow, winding staircase? Engineers studying the site believed the answer lay in a clever, low-tech system. They likely created a central, vertical shaft that ran through many levels, a kind of primitive elevator core. Workers on the deepest levels would load baskets or leather sacks with rubble, hoist them up to the next level using ropes and pulleys, where another team would take over, passing the material up and out in a human chain. Ramps may have been carved in wider areas to allow for sledges or carts. This was not just digging, it was a meticulously orchestrated logistics operation, requiring coordination, communication, and an understanding of physics that feels remarkably modern. And the precision we see is staggering. Corridors run straight for impressive distances. Rooms maintain consistent heights and flat floors. This was achieved with the ancient world's universal surveying tools, the plumb line, a weighted string to check vertical truth, and measuring cords, lengths of rope marked at standard intervals. A master builder would stretch a cord to mark a wall, check his angles with the plumb bob, and guide the carvers. The result of all this painstaking labor was more than a hole in the ground. It was a controlled, engineered space, but carving the stone and removing the rubble was only the first half of the battle. Creating a city this deep presented a far more urgent and invisible challenge, one that would have killed every inhabitant if not solved with brilliant foresight. How do you breathe? The air itself had to be engineered. For a population of thousands living in a sealed stone labyrinth, the atmosphere would turn toxic within hours, a silent killer of carbon dioxide buildup and smoke from cooking fires. The solution was not a machine, but a fundamental understanding of physics woven directly into the city's bones. More than 50 ventilation shafts were carved with meticulous precision, some plunging over 180 feet from the deepest chambers all the way to the surface. These were not random holes. They functioned as a passive, living respiratory system for the entire metropolis, operating on the simple, reliable principle of convection. Warm air from human bodies, livestock, and fires naturally rises. The engineers placed exhaust vents at the highest possible points within the complex. As that warm, stale air ascended and escaped, it created a subtle vacuum, pulling cooler, fresh air down through separate, lower intake shafts connected to hidden surface openings. This created a constant, gentle breeze flowing through the corridors, a perpetual exchange of atmosphere that required no moving parts, no fuel, and no maintenance. It was a timeless technology, as effective today as it was 2,000 years ago. The genius extended beyond mere function to absolute secrecy. On the surface, these vital air shafts were masterfully camouflaged. Many were integrated into what appeared to be dry wells or natural geological cracks in the Cappadocian rock, indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape to any searching eye. An invading force could stand right above one of these lifelines and have no idea that a thriving city breathed just beneath their feet. This invisible, self-sustaining utility meant Derinkuyu could seal its massive stone doors and remain closed for months, its people safe and its air perpetually fresh. Yet a breathable atmosphere solves only one half of the survival equation. A city cannot live on air alone. The next challenge was even more critical, and its solution reveals a level of foresight that borders on prophetic. They needed a water source that was both abundant and utterly secure from contamination or siege. Water is the ultimate tether to life, and Derinkuyu's architects severed that tether from the world above. A city of 20,000 people requires a staggering volume of water, not just for drinking but for cooking, sanitation, and livestock. A single wellhead on the surface would be a giant arrow pointing to their sanctuary. So they engineered a solution that was both invisible and inexhaustible. Deep beneath the city, they located a natural underground aquifer, a vast, hidden reservoir within the porous rock. To reach it, they carved monumental wells, some plunging over 180 feet straight down. But these were not simple holes. They were architectural feats in their own right, with staircases spiraling down their interior walls, allowing safe access to the water level far below. The brilliance was in the seal. These wells were completely capped from the surface, drawing their water from deep within the Earth's own plumbing. This meant the source could never be poisoned by an enemy above, and its location could never be discovered. It was a secret shared only between the city and the bedrock itself. Once raised, the water was channeled through a carved network of small aqueducts and stored in massive, bell-shaped cisterns. These tanks were often lined with a thick, waterproof mortar, a mixture of clay and lime that kept the precious liquid from seeping back into the stone. This created a closed hydrological loop, a self-contained water cycle that could sustain the population through a siege lasting months or even years. It demonstrated a profound, almost intuitive understanding of hydrogeology, managing a resource most surface cities struggled with, all from a position of total concealment. With the fundamental needs of air and water secured, the city's planners faced a new kind of puzzle. How do you organize daily life in a vertical, sunless world? How do you move thousands of people and their goods through this stone labyrinth without descending into chaos? This vertical organization was a masterclass in subterranean urban planning. Derinkuyu functioned as a true vertical metropolis, its 8 confirmed levels and rumored deeper ones stacked with deliberate purpose. To move a population of thousands through this sunless world without chaos required a circulatory system as sophisticated as the city's lungs. The architects carved wide, gently sloping main corridors that acted as primary arteries, connecting the major levels and allowing for the steady flow of people and goods. From these main thoroughfares, a network of smaller, narrower passages branched off like capillaries, leading to private residences, storage chambers, and workshops. This design prevented bottlenecks, ensuring that even in an emergency, movement could be orderly and swift. The staircases themselves were a defensive and spatial innovation. Instead of long, straight flights, they were often crafted as tight, winding spirals. These helical stairs saved invaluable space and presented a formidable challenge to any armed invader trying to ascend, forcing them into a vulnerable, single-file climb. This entire layout reveals a conscious hierarchical zoning system. The upper levels were the public face of the city, housing spaces like stables for livestock, communal kitchens, and wineries. Going deeper, one would find residential quarters, churches carved directly into the rock, and vast storage rooms for food. The deepest, most secure levels were reserved for the most critical resources, like the monumental water wells and possibly shelters for the most vulnerable. This was not a haphazard burrow. It was a meticulously planned society operating in 3 dimensions, a feat of social engineering as much as stone carving. Yet, a city this valuable, this hidden, would inevitably attract those who wished to take it. Its brilliant layout now demanded an equally brilliant system of absolute defense, a series of traps and seals that could turn the entire metropolis into an impenetrable fortress. The massive stone doors of Derinkuyu were more than just barriers. They were brilliant feats of mechanical engineering. Carved from a single, dense slab of volcanic rock, each circular slab could weigh as much as a small car, yet a single person could operate it from the inside. The secret was in the pivot, a central axle carved directly from the living rock of the doorway itself, allowed the multi-ton door to rotate smoothly. A person would simply push against the inner edge, and the entire stone disc would roll across the corridor entrance with a low, grinding rumble, sealing the passage with finality. The fit was perfection. The door's edge slid into a narrow, recessed slot carved into both the floor and the ceiling. When fully closed, it created a seal so tight it was virtually airtight, blocking not just invaders but also sound, light, and even smoke. From the corridor now sealed off, the door became invisible, its curved surface blending perfectly into the textured wall. An enemy standing on the other side would see only unbroken stone with no handle, no hinge, and no seam to betray the passage that had just vanished before them. This allowed the city to compartmentalize itself in an instant. If a threat breached the upper levels, guards could roll these doors shut, isolating entire districts, trapping the invaders in a dead-end maze while the population retreated deeper into safety. But the true psychological power of these doors lay in their silent statement. They communicated a terrifying message to any who might find themselves trapped between them. You are not a conqueror here. You are prey, sealed in a stone labyrinth designed by minds that planned for your arrival centuries ago. This chilling effect was no accident. It was a deliberate layer of defense woven into the very experience of the city. But the stone doors were only the first line of a defense designed to prey on the mind as much as the body. Beyond those sealed thresholds, the city transformed into a psychological weapon. The entrance tunnels were not welcoming gateways. They were long, dark, constricting passages that forced any intruder to abandon formation and proceed in a vulnerable, single-file line. This immediately stripped away the advantage of numbers and collective strength, turning a coordinated army into a chain of isolated, anxious individuals. The corridor itself became an adversary, a tight stone throat designed to induce claustrophobia and dread. This disorientation was then weaponized by the very layout of the city. A corridor that seemed to lead to a central chamber would instead terminate abruptly in a blank wall, a dead end with no warning. Other passages would twist at sharp, jarring angles, creating a labyrinthine puzzle where sound echoed confusingly and every shadow could hide an ambush. For the residents who had memorized these routes from childhood, navigation was second nature. For an invader, it was a nightmare of wrong turns and circling back, a feeling of being swallowed and digested by the stone itself. The architecture held more active threats as well. Strategically placed along certain choke points were small, inconspicuous holes carved into the ceiling. To a lost soldier, they might look like minor imperfections in the rock, but from the chamber above, defenders could use these openings to pour boiling liquids, drop heavy stones, or thrust spears down onto the unsuspecting ranks below. These were not grand battlements, they were intimate, terrifying instruments of control, allowing a handful of defenders to inflict devastating damage on a much larger force trapped in the narrow tunnels. The ultimate goal of this maze was not to kill every invader outright, but to break their will, to become hopelessly lost in a sunless, silent world, to hear the echoes of your own panicked breath and the distant, unseen movements of those who knew the secrets of the walls, was a form of psychological warfare few armies were prepared to face. It rendered their weapons and armor almost useless, transforming their mission of conquest into a desperate struggle for survival. This complex, layered defense system, however, existed for one profound purpose: to protect not just lives but an entire way of life. The people of Derinkuyu were not merely hiding in a hole, they were preserving a fully functioning society with all its culture, faith, and daily rhythms deep within the earth. The stone corridors were not just for defense, they were the hallways of a hidden home. To step into Derinkuyu was not to enter a military bunker, but to discover a complete society that had simply turned its world inside out. The architects knew that survival meant more than just air, water, and walls. It required the preservation of community itself. Excavations reveal spacious, vaulted chambers far larger than any private dwelling. These were the city's living rooms, places for meetings, communal decision-making, and the vital, simple act of gathering. In a sunless world, these spaces would have been where stories were told, children were taught, and the social fabric was continuously woven, a deliberate effort to stave off the isolation and fear that prolonged confinement could bring. This commitment to normalcy extended to the most practical aspects of life. On the upper levels, where ventilation shafts brought the freshest air, the builders carved extensive stables. Stone tethering rings and feeding troughs were integrated directly into the walls, evidence that livestock, chickens, and other animals were brought underground. This was a stroke of logistical genius. The animals provided fresh milk, eggs, and occasional meat, but they also represented a mobile food supply and a crucial link to the agricultural life above. Their presence on the upper levels managed waste and utilized the best airflow, turning a necessity into an engineered feature. The deepest expression of this underground society, however, is found in its places of worship. Carved into the silent heart of the rock are multiple churches and chapels. Some are simple chambers with a cross etched into the wall, while others are elaborate, like the large cruciform church that spans 2 entire levels, its shape echoing the surface world's grandest designs. Here one finds carved altars, baptismal fonts, and the faint traces of frescoes that once held color. These were not hastily made hideaways for prayer. They were permanent, reverent spaces that anchored the community's identity and hope. In a time of conflict, the ability to practice their faith freely, deep within a secret mountain, would have been an immense source of strength and resilience. This complex tapestry of stables, meeting halls, and sanctuaries reveals the inhabitants' profound goal. They were not merely hiding from a threat, they were protecting an entire way of life, creating a self-sufficient microcosm that could endure for generations if necessary. But to sustain this intricate social machine for months or years, they needed to solve one final, monumental puzzle. How do you feed 20,000 people in a world without sunlight? The silence of a sealed city would be broken by the most fundamental of all rhythms, the need to eat. Supporting thousands of people in a sunless world required a logistical miracle, a master plan for sustenance that went far beyond simple stockpiling. Deep within Derinkuyu's cool, dark heart, archaeologists have uncovered entire levels dedicated to this single purpose, revealing a food preservation system of astonishing sophistication. The rock itself was the first and most vital component. The natural, year-round temperature deep underground hovered around a constant 55 degrees Fahrenheit, creating a perfect, passive climate-controlled environment. This transformed the entire lower city into a giant, natural refrigerator and pantry, where spoilage slowed to a crawl. Specialized storage chambers were carved with this precise physics in mind. The most striking features are the large, barrel-shaped pits sunk directly into the floors of these rooms. These deep, smooth-walled silos were designed to hold vast quantities of grain, the caloric backbone of the population. Once filled, they were sealed with heavy, custom-fit stone lids, locking out moisture and pests, creating an airtight vault that could keep wheat, barley, and rye edible for years. The walls of these chambers were not left bare. Networks of shelves and niches were meticulously carved at varying heights, creating organized storage for everything that could be preserved. Dried legumes, lentils, and beans sat in one section. Strips of salted and dried meat hung in another. Hard cheeses, sealed in clay pots with layers of cloth and wax, could age slowly in the perfect humidity. Evidence points to the use of advanced techniques like fermentation for creating durable staples like pickled vegetables and even rudimentary wines or vinegars, adding vital nutrients and flavor to a long-term diet. The sheer scale of these facilities is what speaks volumes. This was not a handful of emergency rations tucked into a corner. We are looking at the calculated caloric output for a small city, engineered to last through not just a weeks-long siege, but potentially through multiple seasons or even years of total isolation. Each sealed grain pit, each stocked shelf, represented a day of survival purchased in advance. This level of provisioning transcends mere preparation. It reflects a profound, long-term strategic mindset. It tells us the people of Derinkuyu were not planning for a temporary scare. They were planning for a world that might force them to remain below, to live a full life disconnected from the sun for a very, very long time. Such an immense, deliberate investment in isolation hints at the magnitude of the threats they anticipated from the world above. Threats so severe that vanishing completely was considered the only viable path to continuity. And when the moment to vanish arrived, the entire city had to move as one, executing a well-rehearsed disappearance that would leave no trace. The sheer scale of Derinkuyu's preparations speaks to a world of profound uncertainty. Why would generations invest such colossal effort into a life of stone and shadow? The answer lies not in a single enemy, but in the relentless tide of history that washed over Cappadocia. This region was a crossroads, a coveted plateau sitting between powerful empires and along major trade routes. For the communities here, security was never a permanent state. The threat could arrive in many forms. It might be swift, violent raids by nomadic tribes sweeping in from the steppes, seeking plunder. It could be the organized might of an imperial army, like the legions of Rome or later the forces of the Byzantine Empire, moving through to secure territory and demand allegiance. In later centuries, the specter of Mongol horse archers, known for their rapid and devastating campaigns, would have justified a need for absolute concealment. For the early Christian communities who greatly expanded the city, the threat was often more targeted. Periods of intense social pressure or outright persecution from other religious groups or governing authorities. Derinkuyu was the universal answer to all these dangers. It did not discriminate between types of invaders. Its strategy was sublime in its simplicity. When the horizon darkened with dust from approaching cavalry, or when word spread of soldiers searching the villages, the entire community had a single, clear option. They could gather their families, drive their livestock down the hidden entrances, roll the great stone doors shut, and simply cease to exist on the surface. The enemy would arrive to find empty homes, silent streets, and a landscape that gave up no secrets. They could occupy the land above, but they could not touch the world below. This was not a fort designed to withstand a siege. It was a sanctuary designed to make a siege pointless. There were no walls to breach, no gates to batter down, only the unyielding earth itself. Every engineering choice we have explored, from the secret air shafts to the years of stored food, was shaped by this core philosophy of disappearance. It was a monument not to war but to resilience, a collective decision to preserve the community at any cost, even if it meant living a life unseen. This radical approach to survival places Derinkuyu in a unique category, but it also invites a fascinating comparison. How does this hidden city measure against the most celebrated defensive structures of the ancient world? Derinkuyu's ambition becomes even clearer when we place it on a global map of ancient subterranean engineering. Around the world, human ingenuity has found expression beneath the surface, yet each site answers a different need. In the American Southwest, the ancestral Pueblones constructed the magnificent cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde. These communities built within vast natural alcoves, using the existing rock overhangs as a roof and building outward with masonry. Their approach was about integrating with a dramatic landscape for defense and community, but they remained fundamentally open to light and air, a world perched on the edge of a canyon rather than buried within the earth. On another continent, in the highlands of Ethiopia, medieval craftsmen carved the stunning rock-hewn churches of Lalibela. These are monolithic structures, each one painstakingly excavated from the top down, a single block of stone sculpted into a place of worship. Their purpose was spiritual monumentality, creating sacred spaces that felt both ancient and eternal, but they were not designed as shelters for daily, long-term life. Even closer to home, in Cappadocia itself, Derinkuyu was not alone. It is part of a vast regional network, with other underground cities like Kaymakli lying just miles away. These sites are often connected by long, subterranean tunnels, suggesting a coordinated defense system where populations could move between strongholds if one were compromised. This transforms the idea from a single hidden city into an entire hidden territory, a subterranean landscape of refuge. The contrast sharpens with sites like the Roman catacombs. Those extensive tunnels were sacred resting places designed for memorial and ritual, not for the living. Similarly, the incredible Qanat systems of ancient Persia were feats of hydrological engineering, masterful tunnels that tapped distant groundwater to sustain surface life, but they were not homes. This is what makes Derinkuyu singular. It was not a burial complex, a water channel, or a fortified village. It was a dedicated, multi-generational habitat, engineered from the ground down, or rather, from the ceiling down, with every system designed to sustain a complete society in indefinite isolation. Its depth, its layered defenses, its independent life support, all speak to an engineering philosophy aimed at one goal, not just surviving a threat, but erasing the community from the visible world until the threat passed. This singular ambition, however, has left a fragile legacy. The very softness of the tuff that made Derinkuyu possible now poses its greatest danger, as the weight of centuries and the touch of countless visitors threaten to erase the masterpiece its builders worked so hard to conceal. The silence of the city was so complete that it became its own kind of memory, preserved not in stories but in stone. For centuries after its final abandonment, Derinkuyu existed as a local secret, its upper chambers used by Cappadocian farmers as cool, convenient cellars for storage. The deeper levels remained sealed, their great stone doors frozen in place, guarding empty corridors. The wider world had simply forgotten that an entire metropolis lay beneath the rolling hills. That changed in a single, ordinary moment in 1963. A resident of the modern town above was renovating his home, knocking down a wall in his basement. His hammer did not strike more plaster, but instead broke through into a void. Behind the wall was not earth, but a dark, cool room carved from the living rock, and beyond that room, a corridor leading into deeper blackness. He had accidentally rediscovered the lost front door to a hidden world. This chance breakthrough triggered a wave of exploration that continues to this day. Archaeologists, initially working by lamplight and rope, began the painstaking process of clearing centuries of accumulated silt and debris from the passages. With each level they descended, the scale of the achievement became more staggering. They were not uncovering a simple shelter, but an architectural iceberg, with each discovered floor hinting at more below. The work moved from excavation to interpretation. Every fragment left behind became a clue in a vast historical puzzle. A scatter of pottery shards in a corner spoke of a hurried meal. The soot stains on a ceiling above a carved niche revealed where an oil lamp had burned for generations, pushing back the darkness. A collection of stone loom waits in a small chamber told of textile work, of people creating cloth and normalcy deep underground. These were not grand treasures, but the intimate artifacts of daily resilience. each one helping to reconstruct the rhythm of a life lived in secret. Modern technology has now given us new eyes to see this ancient city, to map its full, sprawling extent without risking damage to the fragile Tuff. Researchers employ tools the original builders could never have conceived. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses into the earth, revealing the ghostly outlines of chambers and tunnels still filled with earth, hinting that the known 8 levels may be only the beginning. Three-dimensional laser scanners sweep through the accessible corridors, creating perfect digital replicas of the entire complex. These virtual models allow archaeologists to study structural stresses, analyze airflow patterns, and even simulate the experience of moving through the city as its inhabitants did, all from a computer screen. This non-invasive detective work is crucial because Derinkuyu is as delicate as it is monumental. The soft stone that made its creation possible is vulnerable to erosion, to moisture, and to the sheer weight of time. Each scan, each carefully brushed aside layer of dust, raises as many questions as it answers. We can now understand how they lived, but the final act of the city's story remains a profound mystery. How was Derinkuyu ultimately abandoned? There is no evidence of a catastrophic invasion, no signs of violence within its sealed doors. The prevailing theory is one of gradual departure. As the political and religious landscape of Anatolia shifted over centuries, as periods of intense conflict gave way to longer eras of relative stability, the overwhelming need for such a drastic sanctuary may have simply faded. Generations who had grown up knowing the secret passages perhaps chose a life in the sunlight, slowly moving their belongings back to the surface until one day, the last family rolled the great stone door shut for a final time, leaving only echoes in the dark. Yet the city itself was never truly lost. It waited, a silent guardian carved into the earth, holding its secrets until a curious homeowner with a hammer brought its story back into the light, reminding us that the most enduring mysteries are often hidden just beneath our feet. The final silence that settled over Derinkuyu was not a sudden event, but a slow, deliberate exhale. This city, engineered for millennia of intermittent refuge, did not fall in a dramatic siege or a single catastrophe. Its end was a quiet fading, a puzzle whose pieces are still being fitted together by historians. The most widely supported theory points to a change in the world above, not below. By the 15th century, the region came under the stable, centralized control of the Ottoman Empire. This new political order brought a level of security and administrative control that had been absent for centuries. The constant, looming threat of sudden raids or localized conflicts diminished. For the communities who maintained Derinkuyu, the overwhelming necessity to vanish into the earth simply began to fade. The immense effort of keeping the ventilation shafts clear, the water wells functional, and the storage chambers stocked may have gradually seemed less urgent when life on the surface promised greater prosperity and peace. The city became a relic of a more perilous past, maintained out of tradition rather than dire need. Another possibility is that the earth itself, which had provided their sanctuary, ultimately reclaimed it. Cappadocia is a seismically active region. A major earthquake, a not uncommon event over the centuries, could have inflicted catastrophic damage deep underground. Such a tremor might have collapsed critical ventilation shafts, blocking the precious airflow, or caused structural failures in the lower levels, making them unstable and dangerous. Repairing such damage from within would have been a monumental, perhaps impossible task. If the life support systems were compromised, the city would have become uninhabitable almost overnight, forcing a final, permanent evacuation. A third thread in this mystery follows the people themselves. The Christian communities who were the city's primary custodians and expanders in its later centuries faced shifting demographics and pressures. Over time, through gradual migration, economic opportunity, or even organized relocation under new rulers, the population that knew Derinkuyu's secrets may have simply moved away from the region. The knowledge of how to operate the stone doors and navigate the labyrinthine passages was not written down, it was passed orally from parent to child. If a generation left that living memory left with them, within a few decades the exact locations of the hidden entrances could become family stories, then legends, and then fade away entirely. The process of abandonment was likely as practical as everything else about Derinkuyu. People did not flee in a panic, leaving their possessions scattered. Instead, over years or decades, useful items were gradually taken back to the surface. Furniture, tools, and religious artifacts were carried up the winding staircases for the last time. The great stone doors were rolled shut, and the entrances were slowly choked by natural accumulation. Wind-blown silt, landslides, and plant growth performed the final act of camouflage, burying the doorways and air shafts under a blanket of earth. The city did not die, it was simply put to sleep, sealed in a perfect state of preservation by the very geology that created it. The silence that fell was absolute, a deep quiet that lasted for over 500 years, guarding an unparalleled time capsule of ancient engineering and human resilience. This long slumber is what allows us to walk its corridors today, not as invaders but as students, able to study every chisel mark and clever design in astonishing detail, as if its builders had just stepped away yesterday. The official maps of Derinkuyu end at level 8, a depth of around 280 feet, but standing in the lowest public chamber, a quiet, persistent question hangs in the cool air. Does the city truly end here, or are we merely standing on its rooftop? The evidence suggests our exploration is far from complete. Local stories passed down for generations speak of deeper, forbidden levels, of staircases that continue into a darkness no modern flashlight has pierced. These are not just tales, they are supported by perplexing physical clues. Certain ventilation shafts, those ingenious airways, have been measured descending far below the floor of the 8th level, plunging into the absolute black. Why would engineers carve a breathing tube for a room that does not exist? It is a silent argument for a city that continues its descent. The challenge of finding it is immense. Many of the suspected lower passages are now completely flooded by the same aquifer that once sustained life, creating impassable water traps. Others are sealed by ancient rockfalls, collapses that may have occurred centuries ago, locking away whatever lies beyond. Sending people into these unstable, waterlogged depths is extraordinarily dangerous, a risk that has so far halted physical exploration. So, scientists have turned to listening instead of looking. Using non-invasive techniques like seismic tomography and electrical resistivity surveys, they send pulses and currents into the earth. These methods measure how energy waves travel through different materials. Solid rock responds one way, an open cavity responds another. The data returning from deep beneath the known city is compelling. It reveals large, distinct anomalies, patterns consistent with substantial hollow spaces, rooms or corridors, sitting at depths that could potentially double the known extent of Derinkuyu. This is not proof of a furnished level, but it is strong evidence of intentional excavation, of the builder's work continuing far beyond our current reach. This raises a thrilling, almost haunting possibility. If there is a deepest level, what might it contain? A final, vast communal hall reserved for the entire population in the most dire emergency. A protected repository for the most sacred relics of the community. Or perhaps something more utilitarian, the ultimate secure storage, or a primary well so deep it tapped an even more secret water source. The silence from below offers no answer, only the echo of our curiosity. This vertical mystery connects directly to a horizontal one. If Derinkuyu could stretch so deep, how far might it have reached out? the question of its true scale cannot be separated from the whispers of tunnels leading beyond its walls, suggesting this was not an isolated fortress, but potentially the central hub of an entire hidden world. The idea of a single hidden city is staggering, but the reality may have been an entire hidden country. Evidence points to Derinkuyu not as a lone sanctuary, but as a central hub in a vast, coordinated subterranean network. The most compelling clue is a legendary tunnel, a passage said to stretch over 5 miles through the solid rock, connecting Derinkuyu directly to another massive underground city, Cappadocia. This was not a cramped, secret crawl space. Descriptions from early explorations and local accounts suggest it was a true engineered corridor, wide enough for 3 adults to walk side by side, with a height that allowed for comfortable, rapid movement. Imagine the purpose of such a highway in the dark. If one city faced a direct threat, or if its vital resources were compromised, the entire population could evacuate through this hidden artery, emerging miles away in another fully prepared refuge. Supplies, livestock, and information could flow between these strongholds, allowing for a shared economy and a united defense strategy. This transforms our understanding completely. We are no longer looking at isolated communities digging their own private bunkers. We are looking at multiple settlements, likely spanning different ethnic or religious groups, who made a conscious collective decision. They agreed to share resources, to coordinate labor on a monumental scale, and to literally link their fates together beneath the earth. The engineering of such a tunnel alone represents a peak of communal effort. Digging a stable, navigable passage for 5 miles through volcanic tuff, while maintaining secrecy, aligning the route correctly, and ensuring proper ventilation, would have been a multi-generational project. It speaks to a long-term vision that transcended individual lifetimes, a pact carved in stone for the survival of all. This network suggests a sophisticated level of social organization. There must have been agreed upon rules for using the tunnels, protocols for signaling between cities, and shared responsibility for maintenance and guard duty. It paints a picture of a subterranean civilization with its own geography, its own routes, and its own secret maps known only to those who lived within the stone. The existence of this network answers one mystery while deepening another. It explains how a population could sustain itself indefinitely, with multiple sources of water, food, and space to prevent overcrowding. But it also raises a profound question about the world they left behind. What level of persistent danger could compel not just one town but an entire region to invest centuries of labor into building a second, hidden world beneath their feet? The network was their ultimate insurance policy, a testament to a collective resolve to endure any storm from above together in the silent safety of the earth. The true scale of Derinkuyu becomes almost incomprehensible when we shift our gaze from the finished masterpiece to the hands that carved it. Think of the sheer volume of stone that had to be removed, not with dynamite and diesel engines, but with simple metal picks and hammers, one patient strike at a time. To create this 8-level city, experts estimate the removal of millions of cubic feet of rock. This was not the work of a single frantic year, but a generational endeavor spanning centuries, a slow, steady expansion woven into the fabric of community life. How do you manage a project of such staggering complexity and duration without blueprints, without cranes, without any of the tools we consider essential today? The answer lies in a social engineering as brilliant as the stonework itself. Work was almost certainly organized into specialized groups, much like guilds or extended family units. One team of expert carvers who understood the grain and strength of the tuff would have focused on the initial excavation, defining the rough shapes of new chambers and corridors. Another group, perhaps younger and stronger, would have been responsible for the immense logistical challenge of debris removal, hauling baskets of rubble up through the narrow shafts in a human chain that stretched from the deepest dig to the surface. Following them came the masons and finishers, those who smoothed walls, carved storage niches, stair treads, and the iconic circular doors, turning rough caverns into functional, lived-in spaces. The remarkable consistency we see in the architecture, the standardized room heights, the similar door mechanisms, and the predictable layout of ventilation shafts points to a powerful, unifying vision. This suggests either a strong central authority, like a council of elders or religious leaders, who directed the overall plan, or a deeply ingrained tradition passed from master to apprentice over so many generations that the how of building became as instinctive as the why. They likely worked in cycles, expanding their hidden sanctuary during long stretches of peace, treating it not as a frantic wartime project, but as a perpetual communal insurance policy. Every family would have contributed labor, storing their sweat and skill in the stone as surely as they stored grain in the silos. This was not slave labor driven by a whip, but a collective investment in survival by every member of the community. Their shared future literally depended on the strength of their shared effort. The organizational model they developed, this seamless collaboration across specialties and generations, was the invisible framework that made the visible city possible. It ensured that every carved room, every winding staircase, and every hidden air shaft served a deliberate purpose in a societal blueprint written not on parchment, but in the living rock. Derinkuyu's layout was a deliberate map of survival priorities. This was not a chaotic warren where people carved rooms wherever they found soft rock. Every chamber, every corridor was assigned a purpose according to a brilliant vertical logic, a master plan that reveals how they intended to live, not just hide. The city functioned like a carefully organized machine, with each level serving as a distinct component in a system designed for long-term operation. On the very top levels, nearest to the hidden surface entrances, you would find the bustling, noisy heart of daily commerce and public life. Here, vast stables housed livestock, with carved troughs and tethering rings still visible in the walls. The placement was strategic, keeping the animals close to the surface for easier waste management, and utilizing the strongest airflow from the ventilation shafts to carry away odors. Nearby, large communal kitchens featured carved hearths and chimneys that cleverly channeled smoke into specific ventilation tunnels, preventing it from suffocating the lower living areas. These upper floors also contained common rooms and meeting halls, spaces where the community could gather, trade, and make collective decisions, maintaining the social bonds crucial for morale during a prolonged confinement. Descending into the middle levels was like moving from the public square into the quiet neighborhoods of a sunless town. This zone was dedicated to private life and craft. Here, families lived in connected suites of rooms, often featuring carved benches for sleeping, niches for lamps, and small storage areas for personal belongings. Interspersed among the residences were workshops where artisans could continue their trades, whether it was weaving on looms anchored with stone weights, repairing tools, or working leather. The profound spiritual needs of the community were also met here, with multiple churches and chapels carved directly into the rock. Some are simple, with a cross etched into an alcove, while others, like the large cruciform church, are expansive two-level structures. Their location in the middle strata was significant, placing them at the heart of the community's daily life, a constant, sacred anchor in an artificial world. The deepest levels, however, held the city's most precious and vulnerable treasures. This was the secure core, the final redoubt. Here, the monumental water wells plunged into the aquifer, the lifeline that made indefinite isolation possible. Beside them, the massive, bell-shaped storage silos and cisterns held the grain, oil, and preserved food that represented years of calculated preparation. The cool, constant temperature at this depth acted as a perfect natural preservative, It is in these deepest, most defensible chambers that some researchers believe the community's leadership or most vulnerable members would have retreated in a worst-case scenario, protected by multiple rolling stone doors and the entire city above them. This vertical zoning accomplished several critical goals. It separated noisy, odorous, or public functions from the quiet, private, and sacred spaces, creating a sense of order and normalcy. More importantly, it placed the absolute essentials for survival, water, and the bulk food supply, in the most protected location imaginable, behind every possible defensive layer the city could muster. This purposeful architecture sends a clear message across the centuries. Derinkuyu was not a panic room. It was a meticulously planned alternative habitat, a blueprint for a complete society that could detach from the surface world and sustain its own heartbeat in the dark for as long as it needed to. The stone city's genius lies not in its age, but in its timeless logic. Derinkuyu's solutions, carved over 1,000 years ago, resonate with a surprising urgency in our modern world of complex systems and fragile grids. Its most elegant lesson is in its breadth. The passive ventilation network, which used the simple physics of convection to move air without a single moving part, is a masterclass in sustainable design. Today, architects and engineers striving for net-zero energy buildings look to these exact principles, designing structures that use thermal chimneys and strategic airflow to heat and cool spaces without massive carbon footprints. Derinkuyu was a green building long before the term existed, powered not by fossil fuels but by an intimate understanding of the environment it was carved from. This deep material intelligence is another profound parallel. The builders did not import steel or concrete. They used the soft volcanic tuff beneath their feet, a locally sourced, renewable in its abundance, and perfectly adapted material. This mirrors the core tenet of modern eco-architecture, which emphasizes using local, natural materials to reduce transportation energy and create structures in harmony with their setting. Their geotechnical skill, understanding how to carve without collapse, prefigures our own advanced tunneling and underground construction techniques, proving that working with the Earth's properties, not against them, yields the most enduring results. Beyond physical systems, the city's social blueprint offers powerful insights for contemporary disaster preparedness. Derinkuyu was not a government bunker for an elite few. It was a community-wide refuge engineered from the ground up by the community itself. Its success depended on shared knowledge, coordinated practice, and collective responsibility for maintenance. This model of decentralized, community-based resilience is precisely what modern emergency planners advocate for in an era of climate uncertainty and other large-scale disruptions. The city teaches that the strongest infrastructure is not just about strong walls, but about strong social bonds and inclusive planning. Even its vertical, multi-use organization feels strikingly modern. By stacking stables, living quarters, workshops, worship spaces, and storage in a cohesive vertical stack, Derinkuyu achieved an incredible density and efficiency of space. This is the same conceptual leap behind today's multi-use skyscrapers, which seek to create self-contained vertical neighborhoods where people can live, work, and socialize, minimizing horizontal sprawl. The ancient city, in its way, was a pioneering example of compact, three-dimensional urban design. Ultimately, Derinkuyu stands as a powerful challenge to our own technological arrogance. We often equate advanced engineering with complexity, with microchips and composite materials. This hidden metropolis reminds us that true sophistication can reside in simplicity, in a deep and observant understanding of materials, physics, and human need. Its builders achieved monumental results with what we would consider rudimentary tools, because their genius was in their thinking, not just in their implements. They asked the right questions and listened to the answers whispered by the stone and the air. This legacy invites us to look at our own challenges, from sustainable housing to resilient communities, and consider whether the most elegant solutions might be rooted in timeless principles of adaptation and clever, low-tech ingenuity. To touch that legacy directly, we must now turn from the grand architecture to the smallest, most personal traces of life, the objects that made this stone world a home. The silent corridors of Derinkuyu speak through the objects left behind. These are not the treasures of kings, but the humble tools of a people determined to preserve their way of life in the most extraordinary of circumstances. Every artifact uncovered by archaeologists is a chapter in a manual for subterranean survival, written not in words but in stone and clay. The most common finds are grinding stones, heavy, hand-held tools with smooth, concave surfaces worn down by years of use. In the dim lamplight, women would have knelt, patiently grinding wheat or barley into flour, the rhythmic scraping sound a familiar, comforting echo of surface life. This simple, daily act transformed stored grain into the bread that sustained the community, a fundamental skill that anchored their self-sufficiency. Near these grinding stones, researchers often find small, disc-shaped objects of baked clay or stone, each with a hole drilled through the center. These are loom weights. They were tied to the vertical threads on a wooden loom, providing the tension needed to weave cloth. Their presence tells us that the people of Derinkuyu did not merely stockpile clothing, they maintained the entire cycle of textile production underground. They spun wool from their sheltered sheep into yarn and wove it into fabric for garments, blankets, and sacks. This was not a hobby, it was a critical industry, ensuring the community could repair and replace essential items for the duration of their confinement, no matter how long it lasted. Light in the perpetual dark was a precious commodity, and the city is scattered with the evidence of it, simple oil lamps made of pottery. These were small, shallow dishes with a pinched spout to hold a wick. Filled with olive oil, they would have cast a faint, flickering glow, just enough to illuminate a face, a task, or a passageway. The soot stains still visible on ceilings above certain niches mark where these lamps burned for hours, pushing back the oppressive blackness and carving out small islands of visibility and warmth. The very design of these lamps speaks to efficiency. Every drop of fuel mattered in a sealed world. The pottery tells a similar story of pragmatic adaptation. Archaeologists find large, sturdy storage jars known as pithoi for holding grain, oil, and water. They find simpler cooking pots and bowls, their surfaces often blackened from use over open hearths. There is a notable absence of finely painted or decorated luxury ware. The ceramics of Derinkuyu are almost uniformly functional, built for durability and purpose over beauty. This material record points strongly toward an egalitarian society. When survival is the collective goal, social energy flows into provisioning and maintenance, not into displays of individual wealth or status. The community's wealth was measured in full-grain silos and functioning water wells, not in gold or jewels. Yet, amidst this stark practicality, there is evidence of a deeper spiritual dimension. Carved into the walls of rooms and chapels, one finds crosses and other religious symbols. These are not grand frescoes, but often simple, reverent etchings made by individual hands. In a world without sunlight, faith provided a different kind of light. These symbols offered comfort, identity, and a sense of divine protection in the profound isolation of the underground. They remind us that the inhabitants were nurturing their souls as carefully as they were tending their bodies and their stores. This combination of gritty industry and quiet devotion paints a complete portrait of resilience. Each grinding stone, each loom weight, each soot-stained lamp is a silent witness to the unbroken rhythm of daily life, a testament to a community that chose to carry their entire world with them into the dark and to keep its heart beating against all odds. The stark utility of grinding stones and oil lamps is punctuated by something far more profound: deliberate beauty. In a refuge engineered for pure survival, one might expect every mark on the wall to serve a mechanical purpose. Yet, scattered throughout Derinkuyu's shadowy halls, you find the quiet insistence of the human spirit, carved directly into the stone. Simple crosses, etched with care into door frames and alcoves, are the most common. In a designated chapel, the faint, ghostly outlines of what were once colorful frescoes can still be traced, their pigments faded but their intent clear. Even the architecture itself carries a flourish, with doorways sometimes framed by gentle arches and supporting columns carved to mimic their elegant surface counterparts. One particular chamber, with its tiered benches facing a central niche, is strongly believed to have been a religious school, a place where faith and knowledge were passed to the next generation in the dim lamplight. This was not decoration for decoration's sake. In a time of extreme stress and confinement, these symbols performed vital psychological work. They reinforced a powerful cultural and religious identity, acting as anchors of normalcy and hope when the world above might have felt hostile or lost. They actively humanized an environment that could otherwise feel oppressively alien, a world of unbroken rock and perpetual twilight. A carved cross on a corridor wall did more than inspire, it also guided. In the confusing, repetitive maze of tunnels, these familiar symbols likely served as subtle wayfinding markers, signaling a turn toward a sanctuary, a school, or a main thoroughfare. This seamless integration of symbolism into a space of pure function sends a powerful message. The people of Derinkuyu were not merely preserving their physical lives, they were safeguarding the very essence of who they were. Their art declares that even in extremis, under the immense pressure of secrecy and fear, human creativity and the need for meaning are not luxuries, they are indispensable parts of resilience. This drive to connect, to mark identity, and to communicate within their sunless world logically extends to another, more ephemeral mystery: how they manage to coordinate and stay informed in the absolute silence of their stone sanctuary. The silence of Derinkuyu was not empty but alive with information. In a world devoid of natural light, the ears became the primary scouts, and the city's engineers, whether by accident or brilliant design, sculpted an entire acoustic landscape for security. The soft volcanic tuff of the walls and ceilings did not absorb sound, it conducted it, carrying vibrations over surprising distances with eerie clarity. A whisper exchanged in a lower-level corridor could travel up a winding staircase, faint but intelligible, to listeners above. Certain chambers, with their specific dome-like shapes and smooth surfaces, acted as natural resonators, amplifying the scrape of a sandal or the clink of a tool, turning ordinary activity into a localized broadcast. This was not a flaw, it was a feature. For the residents attuned to the sonic signature of their home, these properties created a living auditory map. The familiar, rhythmic sounds of daily life, the grinding of grain, the murmur of conversation from the communal hall, formed a constant, reassuring backdrop. Any break in that pattern, an unfamiliar footfall, a shout, or the metallic ring of a weapon, would stand out like a thunderclap, signaling intrusion long before an enemy was seen. The architecture itself was engineered to confuse unwanted listeners while aiding communication. The central ventilation shafts, those vital airways, likely doubled as primitive speaking tubes. A person standing at the opening of a shaft on the 5th level could call down or up to another level, their voice carried cleanly by the smooth stone conduit, bypassing the labyrinth of corridors entirely. This allowed for swift, clear coordination across the vertical city without anyone needing to traverse the stairs. For invaders, however, the sonic environment was a weapon of disorientation. The network of dead-end corridors and sharply angled turns would cause sounds to echo and rebound from multiple surfaces at once. A shout from a comrade might seem to come from the left, then the right, then from behind, sowing confusion and panic. The very layout that was a familiar neighborhood to residents became a hall of mirrors for sound to an outsider, making it impossible to gauge distance, direction, or even the size of the space they were in. This mastery of the auditory realm transformed passive listening into an active defense system. Watchmen stationed at key junctions did not need to see an approaching threat. They could hear it evolving, tracking the progression of unfamiliar noises through the stone. The scrape of armor against a wall, the labored breathing of someone lost in a maze, the frustrated commands of a leader whose voice was swallowed by the rock, all of these painted a clear picture for the defenders. It allowed a small number of sentinels to monitor vast sections of the city, their ears covering ground their eyes could not. Living in this heightened sonic state required a profound sensory adaptation. Children growing up in Derinkuyu would learn to identify people by their step, to interpret the meaning behind a distant door rolling shut, to understand the difference between the echo of a friend and the resonance of a stranger. Their world was navigated by ear as much as by memory, a testament to human adaptability. Yet, existing in this carefully controlled environment, sealed away from sun and fresh air for extended periods, posed its own set of silent challenges to the human body, questions that lead us from the engineering of space to the resilience of the people within it. The quiet hum of a healthy community is perhaps the city's most overlooked engineering triumph. Keeping thousands of people alive in a sealed stone box for months required a meticulous, invisible war against illness, a battle fought with airflow, water, and ingenious zoning. The constant cool temperature of the deep rock provided a natural advantage, slowing the spread of many pathogens that thrive in warmth. But the real test was managing the byproducts of life itself. In specific, isolated chambers, archaeologists have identified deep pits carved directly into the floor, almost certainly serving as communal latrines. The thinking is that these were not static pits but part of a managed system. They may have been periodically flushed with water channeled from the main cisterns, or cleaned out and treated with ash or lime, substances known to the ancient world for their disinfectant properties. This waste management was not a casual affair, it was a critical public health protocol. The city's brilliant ventilation system was its first line of defense here, too. The constant, gentle convection current flowing through the corridors would have steadily pulled foul air and airborne microbes away from living spaces and up through the exhaust shafts, preventing the buildup of toxic gases and the stagnation of air that breeds disease. This passive air exchange was a constant, silent janitor. The vertical zoning we explored earlier was another deliberate health measure. By placing the stables and suspected waste areas on the upper levels, near the fresh air intakes, and keeping the living quarters, churches, and food storage deeper down, they created a sanitary gradient. Odors and potential contaminants were pulled up and out before they could seep into the heart of the community. Most vital of all was their access to a pristine water source. The deep wells tapping the protected aquifer meant drinking water was completely isolated from surface contamination and their own waste streams. In an era where waterborne illness was a common killer, this guaranteed a clean supply was nothing short of life-saving. While direct evidence of their daily health practices is sparse, the simple fact that Derinkuyu was designed for repeated, long-term habitation is the ultimate proof. They would not have invested centuries of labor into a refuge that became a death trap after a few weeks. Their comprehensive planning extended to the well-being of the body as surely as to the security of the walls. Yet, this masterpiece of subterranean resilience, built to withstand centuries of human conflict, now faces a far slower, more insidious enemy, the patient, relentless pressure of the earth and time itself. The very stone that gave them sanctuary also held a constant, silent threat. A city carved from soft volcanic tuff exists in a delicate balance between space and stability, where every new room weakens the whole. The architects of Derinkuyu understood this fundamental tension with an intuition that feels remarkably modern. Their solution was not to avoid carving, but to carve with a deep respect for the rock's own logic, leaving strategic parts of the mountain untouched. Throughout the sprawling complex, at regular intervals, they left massive, uncarved pillars of the living rock standing. These were not decorative columns added later, but the original mountain itself, left in place during excavation to act as natural, load-bearing supports. They form a grid of immense strength, holding up the ceilings of vast chambers and the weight of entire levels above. This reveals a profound grasp of structural engineering, an understanding that true strength often lies in what you choose not to remove. This intelligent restraint extended to the shapes they carved. In the larger communal rooms, storage halls, and churches, you will almost never find a simple, flat ceiling. Instead, the builders sculpted graceful arches and domes. An arch is nature's perfect weight distributing shape, channeling the immense downward pressure of the rock outwards and down into the walls and those sturdy pillars, rather than allowing it to bear down on a single, vulnerable point. This simple geometric principle, mastered by later civilizations in grand cathedrals, was already being applied deep underground in Cappadocia. Furthermore, the city's interconnected nature provided a hidden safety net. The dense network of rooms and corridors created a honeycomb structure. In engineering terms, this offers redundancy. If one small area were to become unstable, the load could be transferred through multiple pathways to the surrounding rock, preventing a local failure from cascading into a major collapse. All of this engineering was tested by the restless Earth itself. Cappadocia is a seismically active region, lying on a complex web of fault lines. The ground here has shaken countless times over the millennia. Interestingly, the very softness of the tuff that seemed so vulnerable may have been a secret asset during minor tremors. Unlike brittle stone that cracks under stress, this compacted ash has a degree of flexibility. It can sway and compress slightly, allowing the entire city to absorb and dissipate seismic energy like a cushion, rather than shattering. The interconnected spaces and rounded arches would have helped in this, allowing the structure to move as a cohesive, resilient unit. It is a stunning example of passive seismic design, engineered long before the concept had a name. Yet, for all this brilliance, the Earth always holds the greater force. While Derinkuyu could shrug off small shakes, a major, direct earthquake would have unleashed energies far beyond any ancient defense. The evidence for this is written in the stone. In certain lower passages, archaeologists find sections completely sealed by ancient rockfalls, collapses where the ceiling gave way in a single, catastrophic moment. Other areas show signs of repeated, smaller subsidences, with repairs made by later inhabitants who shored up walls with additional masonry. It is likely that over the centuries, significant seismic events did cause serious damage, particularly to the deepest and most ambitious levels. Repairing a collapsed ventilation shaft 180 feet down, or clearing a water well blocked by rubble, might have been a task so dangerous and daunting that the community simply sealed off the compromised section and retreated upward. This slow geological attrition, the mountain gradually reclaiming its deepest chambers, may have been a key factor in the gradual shrinking and eventual abandonment of the city's full original extent. Their greatest, most silent engineering challenge was never fully won. It was a perpetual negotiation with the mountain they called home, a testament to human ingenuity persisting under the immense, patient pressure of the Earth. The map of Derinkuyu we walk today is merely its foyer. A staggering 85 to 90% of the city remains a sealed book, its pages locked behind unstable rockfalls, deep floodwaters, or the simple, prudent fear of triggering a collapse. We have explored a masterpiece, but we stand in its antechamber, surrounded by walls that whisper of chambers beyond. What lies in that overwhelming majority of untouched space? The possibilities are as tantalizing as they are transformative. Perhaps there is a true central archive, a chamber lined with stone shelves holding clay tablets or scrolls that detail the city's laws, its trade agreements, or its foundational stories. We might one day find a grand governing hall, a subterranean senate where representatives from connected cities met in secret to coordinate their hidden world. There could be entire levels of specialized workshops we have not yet imagined, for metalworking, pottery firing, or the crafting of the complex tools that built the city itself. Each sealed corridor holds the potential to dramatically rewrite our understanding of Derinkuyu's social structure, its economic complexity, and the full scope of its inhabitants' ambitions. The key to these rooms will not be a simple pickaxe but quiet, patient technology. The future of discovery here lies in non-invasive eyes and delicate hands. Advanced ground-penetrating radar and seismic tomography will grow ever more precise, painting high-definition, three-dimensional maps of the hollow spaces without ever breaking the stone. Small, agile robotics designed to navigate flooded tunnels and precarious rubble may one day send back the first images in millennia from a perfectly preserved room. Each scan, each cautious probe is a promise. Derinkuyu is not a closed chapter of history, but a living laboratory. Its greatest revelations are not behind us, but ahead, waiting in the dark for the right moment to be gently, respectfully brought back into the light. This forward-looking perspective, this sense of a story still unfolding, is perhaps the most fitting legacy for a city that was always designed for the future. The Stone City's journey from a secret sanctuary to a shared human treasure is a story in itself. Today, Derinkuyu is formally recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a designation that places it among the world's most significant cultural landmarks. It is no longer a hidden fortress, but an open classroom, attracting scholars, engineers, and curious visitors from every corner of the globe. This transformation is profound. It means the city built for absolute concealment now serves the opposite purpose, to reveal and educate, to stand as an open testament to the universal human capacities for ingenuity and resilience in the face of adversity. Preserving this delicate masterpiece is a continuous, careful negotiation. The soft volcanic tuff that allowed its creation is now its greatest vulnerability. The steady breath of thousands of visitors introduces humidity and subtle temperature shifts that can slowly degrade the ancient walls. Conservationists work with a light touch, monitoring air quality, reinforcing fragile areas with minimal, reversible supports, and managing visitor flow to prevent undue stress on any single passage. It is a global effort to protect a legacy carved from local stone, ensuring that the silent lessons of Derinkuyu remain audible for centuries to come. Perhaps its most enduring legacy is how it quietly upends our modern assumptions about historical progress. Derinkuyu challenges the linear timeline we often imagine, where engineering marvels belong only to the recent centuries of steel and silicon. Here, carved with bronze tools and illuminated by oil lamps, is a system of environmental control, urban planning, and communal logistics that rivals sophisticated modern projects. It proves that the leap from concept to execution, from survival instinct to sustained creation, is not bound by era. The ancient builders possessed a deep, intuitive mastery of physics, geology, and sociology, achieving a holistic vision that modern specialists might struggle to replicate with their same constraints. Ultimately, Derinkuyu stands as a permanent monument to a fundamental human drive, the will of a community to preserve itself. It is not a tomb, but a cradle, evidence of a society that chose to invest generations of labor not in monuments to a single ruler, but in a shared promise of safety for every member. The rolling stone doors, the hidden air shafts, the deep wells, all speak of a collective decision to place the future of the whole above the comfort of the individual. In its cool, dark halls, we find no statues of kings, only the echoes of countless anonymous hands that carved, carried, and cared for one another. This is the city's final and most resonant message, a whisper from the deep past about the incredible things we can achieve not through dominion, but through cooperation, foresight, and a common, unbreakable purpose. Derinkuyu is a symphony carved in stone where geology, physics, and human resolve performed in perfect harmony. This was not a collection of random tunnels, but a single, brilliant instrument of survival. Every feature we have explored, from the passive breath of its ventilation shafts to the silent, rolling thunder of its stone doors, was a precise, calculated solution to an extreme and pressing problem. The city's genius lies in its holistic vision, an understanding that true security required more than strong walls. It required fresh air, clean water, stored food, social order, and even spiritual solace. It was a complete, self-sustaining ecosystem engineered for the singular purpose of preserving a community against any storm from the world above. This masterpiece of subterranean living challenges our modern timeline of progress. We often look to the recent centuries of steel and silicon for our icons of innovation. Yet here, in the soft volcanic rock of Cappadocia, ancient minds achieved a feat of integrated design that still inspires architects and engineers today. Their work reminds us that the drive to innovate, to solve complex problems with elegant simplicity, is not a modern invention but a timeless human trait, ignited most powerfully by necessity and a shared will to endure. As we surface from this journey into the depths, consider the modern puzzles we face, from sustainable housing to resilient communities. Derinkuyu whispers a question across the centuries: what could we achieve if we combined our advanced knowledge with that same spirit of elegant, purposeful ingenuity? If this descent into one of history's greatest hidden wonders captivated you, subscribe for more explorations of the world's enduring mysteries. We would love to hear your thoughts. What do you believe was Derinkuyu's most impressive feat? Share your perspective in the comments below.